Amy, let me tell you about a magical place that is so exactly designed to be enclosed space, year-round fun for the whole family that I bet you already know what I'm going to say before I even say the name. Let's say it together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Great Wolf Lodge. You got it, Amy.
My kids loved Great Wolf Lodge when we went. You probably already know that it has a huge indoor water park with a wave pool, lazy river, a bunch of massive water slides. But then your pack can hit the other attractions because wait, there's more.
Great Wolf Lodge has adventure-packed attractions like Magi Quest, a live-action game kids can play throughout the lodge, plus the Northern Lights Arcade. Spent some quality time there, so your kid who loves the lazy river and your kid who loves fantasy games will both have a great time.
Great Wolf Lodge also offers great dining options and complimentary daily events like nightly dance parties, all under one roof. Unpack the car once and you're settled in to have fun. And with 22 lodges across the country, you're always a short drive away from adventure.
We've both had such great times at Great Wolf Lodge, so bring your pack together at a lodge near you. Learn more at greatwolf.com and strengthen the pack.
So just a heads up, this episode contains discussions of depression, postpartum depression, and suicide. If those topics are not good for you to hear about, you may want to skip this episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Margaret.
And this is Amy, and today we're talking to Amy Koppelman. In 2003, Amy Koppelman published the novel A Mouthful of Air, a compassionate and wrenching portrait of a new mother torn between the love she feels for her family and the voice in her head that insists they'd be better off without her. Since then, Amy has written 2 more critically acclaimed novels, one of which became the film I Smile Back, starring Sarah Silverman. Amy's new film is an adaptation of that first novel, A Mouthful of Air, a new edition of which was re-released in conjunction with the film. The film, A Mouthful of Air, starring Amanda Seyfried, is in theaters nationwide starting October 29th. The movie was written, directed, and produced by Amy Koppelman. Amy lives in New York City with her family. She is an outspoken advocate for women's mental health. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
I loved this novel. I read it in 2 days, could not put it down. It's about a woman named Julie who, from the outside, she has it all. She has a loving, attentive husband. She has beautiful kids that are healthy. She has enough money not to worry. She loses the baby weight really quickly. Like everything seems like it's going her way, and yet all is not as it seems. And I'm curious why you created her that way.
Back then, really, no one was talking about postpartum depression, and we weren't really even talking that much about depression. Styron had a great book called Darkness Visible, which was the first thing that I read that I was like, oh, that's what depression is. And so for me, it was really important to show that depression is an illness. And so I thought if you take every obstacle away from her, all the things that would get in the way from healing, and yet she still can't figure it out. Imagine what happens if you add a subway stop. Imagine what happens if you're a single mother. That was my drive behind how to situate her. I also have no imagination. So I was like, well, I live on the Upper West Side, so I'll just keep it here. But that is what I thought. Take every obstacle away so that you can say, this is no different than if you had asthma or if you've had diabetes. You would go to the doctor and you would get better. And this is somebody who has health care and has a support system and goes to the doctor. But the power of this illness, the symptoms kind of reaffirm the illness. There's probably a smarter way to say that, which I should learn. But, you're constantly telling yourself when you're depressed that there's no hope, that you're a terrible person, that you shouldn't be here, that everybody would be better off without you, that you're going to fail your children, you're going to fail your husband. And so those symptoms make actually going and trying to get better especially more difficult.
One of the things we hear a lot about it from our listeners is this kind of feeling of almost not deserving that space to be sad, to be depressed, to struggle with their kids, because they do feel like their lives are going well and they have all of the kind of markers of happiness. One of the things that I think the book really captures is the loneliness of that feeling, that the depression brings you this feeling of isolation.
Yeah, I mean, last month watching those mothers in Afghanistan, if you're at home with a baby in a house or apartment, a room that has air conditioning, forget air conditioning that has walls, right?
Walls, right. Water, running water.
What right do you have in any world to be sad, right? You have no right. You are in a safe place. You have been given a healthy child. You know, you love this child more than anything. You've never felt even this kind of love. And yet you just feel all alone and sad and undeserving. And that voice in your head just keeps reinforcing itself, you know, because you keep comparing. You go, look at the women in Afghanistan. Look at the homeless woman on the street. How are these people? I'm so lucky. And why am I like this? And that also just reaffirms the shame. And, you know, I did not know what I was writing at the time I was writing it. I mean, I don't think anybody sets out to write this novel. Like once you've written it, you're like, this is never going to be a bestseller. Like no one's going to read this. But I did know I was writing about shame and how women often judge themselves within the confines of that shame, whether it's like real shame for things that we did wrong or the shame that's been put on us by people telling us the things that we did wrong. And it's almost like that's the barometer of what we allow our experience of joy to be or happiness to be. But I also think that when people have children, the coping mechanisms that they've often had to like repress memories or other feelings come out, because you look at this little child and they're so innocent and helpless. And no one really explains that to you. Like in Mommy and Me class, they don't really explain that all of a sudden one day this thing's going to come out of you and look at you and think that you have all the answers. And it's going to be your responsibility to take that child to make sure they stay safe. And, you know, if you are the most healthy person in the world, that's a horrifying thought. So if you're depressed, the volume, you just can't adjust it. It's like you just can't reach the volume knob to turn down the knob to give yourself time to say, oh, wait, this isn't true. I'm actually maybe not the worst person in the world, because that's all you hear. You can't hear anybody else saying, I love you. You can't hear anybody else saying, you're great. You did a great job. You can't feel the baby against your heart and against your chest. And instead of feeling the heart to heart, warm, wonderful feeling, you're feeling petrified. You know, what if that heart stops? What if and so that's what I did know I was writing about, shame. To answer your question with the loneliness, we're so ashamed still with all the conversation for me getting to go and learn about like this whole mommy world. There is this whole community of moms, like actually really trying to help moms. It's not just like moms making the perfect sandwich. I said to my daughter the other day, thank goodness I wasn't a mom when there was Instagram, because I used to like cut things out like in heart shapes and decorate the bag. And now like on my scroll, I see like bento boxes with 3D sandwiches that talk, that are like, eat me, I'm really healthy. And it's just like, it's just too much. But the good part of that is there are people talking about this. So you're able to be less lonely, but have the anonymity of not being a face. But we have to get to the point as women where we actually talk about it in person in the mommy groups, in person, at places of worship, where we're not just talking about what we feed our child, but we're talking about how we feel and how we're worried about how that will affect our child. We still really don't talk about that much because we're scared that nobody else is feeling like us. And like I said, even the most healthy person knows it's very scary to be a mom.
Yeah. You said in another interview that when you write fiction, that you try to get as close to the truth as possible, even if it's ugly, so that somebody else might read it and feel less alone. I think this book is so brave, and I really thought, wow, that's it. I mean, you go there in this book and you express things that every mother has felt at some point, even if it's for 5 seconds. And it's compounded by the fact that I feel this feeling and now I feel horrible shame because no mother ever feels this way. Just me that has these dark moments. And this book, by going there, really helps with that, I would think.
There's a scene in the book, there's a variation of that scene in the movie where she's at this party and, to her, everybody appears perfect, because what's also this weird disconnect is, of course, the people at the party who she thinks are, who she doesn't even really like, the other moms that all of us have been with that weren't necessarily people that we might want to be friends with. Like, we think that everybody, whether we like them or not, it does not have these feelings, even though we know intellectually, like somebody else in this room has to be feeling the same way.
We're talking to Amy Koppelman, who is the author of A Mouthful of Air, and we'll be right back.
For some of us, tax season is one of the only times that we look at our finances fully. And once it's over, well, that was terrible. And it is completely understandable not to want to think about it for another whole year. But using Monarch and being intentional with your finances in an ongoing way helps you see where your money is going and how you can put your refund to best use.
We are here to tell you, simplify your finances with Monarch. Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool designed to make your life easier. It brings your entire financial life, budgeting, accounts and investments, net worth, and future planning together in one dashboard on your phone or laptop.
Feel aware and in control of your finances this tax season and get 50% off your Monarch subscription with code FRESH.
As you know, my husband and I are preparing to send, 3 kids off to college, and I cannot tell you how helpful Monarch has been in showing us our full financial picture, helping us to track our spending and reach important savings milestones. Our weekly meeting, Amy, it's now run by Monarch.
Love it. Achieve your financial goals for good with Monarch, the all-in-one tool that makes money management simple.
Use code FRESH at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off at monarch.com, code FRESH.
You know that thing where you get an amazing pair of shoes at a really great price and want to tell everyone about it? Yeah, so do we. Here at Designer Shoe Warehouse, we'll give you something to brag about, like the latest styles from brands you love, or the trends everyone's obsessing over, or shoes that make you feel like, well, you. So go ahead, show off a little. Find shoes that get you at prices that get your budget. Head to your DSW store or DSW.com today. DSW, let us surprise you.
We're back with Amy Koppelman, the author of A Mouthful of Air. There's sort of 2 aspects of this that you get into in the book. This sort of internal shame of, this is how I'm feeling. How can women in Afghanistan be in these horrible situations? Well, I should be grateful. And then there's this kind of societal shame that we were just sort of touching on. How can she be so self-indulgent with the way she's feeling? Or maybe realistically that friends of ours or maybe moms in your playgroup are looking and going, oh, this person doesn't seem like they're handling it very well. Is that something you think that has gotten better or worse with this social media kind of new world, Instagram? Is that dividing us, do you think, or is it bringing us closer together?
Well, I think it's a mix. And I think one of the things about when you're depressed or when you're just a mom is, you're constantly looking for affirmation of where you're failing. I used to say when my kids were little, I'd go to bed every night and I'd say to my husband, well, if I didn't fail today, then I must not have tried to be a good mom because you always go to bed feeling like you could have done this more, or you should have done that more. So in terms of Instagram, you can make it where the things you're looking for are those 3D lunches that you don't have time to make because you're working, and you could feel like a failure. Those are the negative parts, or like the women who have lost so much weight so fast and you're sitting there and it's 8 months later and you still haven't lost the weight. Those are the negative parts. But the positive parts are that people are talking about this online. And my daughter, who's 21 years old, a couple months ago, she sent me an Instagram post and she said, you have to meet this woman. Look at her. She's pregnant. And she's talking about perinatal depression. She's depressed while she's pregnant. And look at her, she's crying. And you should know this woman. I was moved by that because I was moved that this woman was brave enough to be talking about these things while she was pregnant. But I was also moved that my daughter knew what that was. It somehow weirdly came across her scroll. Why did that come across whatever the algorithm it was? And that she knew that that was something that we could talk about. So that dividing wall between at least the mother and the daughter, if she had those issues, she would know she could speak to me about them because I guess I've spoken to her. So I think this is it always sounds kind of corny, but the 2 things that you can do are, one, of course, you need to ask for help. But the other thing you need to do as a woman or as a mother or as somebody who has or maybe hasn't had this kind of, terrible depression after having a child is when you're walking down the supermarket aisle and you see somebody who drops something and they're flustered, if you actually take a second to look at them and see, are they just flustered with their kid in the supermarket cart? Are they okay? And sometimes if you just say hi to somebody and smile, or, you see it as an older mom, you see a new mom and you watch them and you kind of know when you go to the, park or wherever and you see them, you can give an opening to somebody so that they could talk to you. And I think we just have to do that more person by person, just kind of literally and metaphorically, like put our arms around the younger mother and say, I felt this way, or my friends felt this way. This is what's happening to you. It's no different than asthma. If you go to the doctor, we can get you better. You have bad postpartum depression and you go to the park and you have your baby on a swing. You put your little kid on a swing. You're worried about so many things. You're worried about, is the baby going to fall out of the basket? Or if you're there and you're not worried about that, you're pushing the swing, but there's like a numb gauziness between you and the swing. And, if you were at the park and you were having a hard time breathing, you would have no issue whipping out your inhaler from your jeans and, taking a puff of your inhaler and then going back to playing with your baby. But somehow, as I keep saying in the unintellectual way, the symptoms of depression just only reinforce the illness. You don't blame yourself for not being able to breathe. You do blame yourself for not being able to calm down or be there with your child. But if you're wheezing, you don't blame yourself. So why is this idea of saying I'm having a hard time as a mom so hard? And I guess it's because your whole life, you're raised that women are supposed to be maternal. Maternal means X. And nowhere in that narrative does anybody say to you, you might be petrified. Your hormones are going to play such tricks on you. You might be somebody who's never experienced depression and has this one-off of this happening. You might be somebody who's had episodes of depression throughout your life. And now this is like a stronger, worse version. And also, you might be somebody who was traumatized as a child. There's a big correlation between those things. And looking at that child and this idea of not being able to protect them, when you actually are finally having like the visceral understanding of you having once been that little and somebody not protecting you, those things become overwhelming. No different than asthma, like asthma in your heart or your mind. But we don't allow ourselves to forgive ourselves for that, because we do look around and think everybody else is okay because we're all smiling behind our strollers. So I'm hoping that with the movie, Amanda's performance is so incredible. It's almost like too good. She feels so palpable and real. And I'm hoping that when people see the movie, they'll understand, oh, wait, I can talk about this. Because I hate to say actors are brave because it sounds so silly, like firemen are brave, but if you can be brave as an actor, this performance is very brave because, she is just totally vulnerable. And I'm hoping that the trickle down of that is people will say, well, if she can do that, either she as Amanda or she as Julie can do that, then I'm going to go online and look up Postpartum Depression International. Call Postpartum Depression International. They have people all over the country, who you can meet and who will help you. And so I'm hoping in some tiny, tiny way we can get to people.
Can we talk about how awareness and treatment of postpartum depression itself has changed since this novel first came out? It's been more than 15 years, right? And it seems like there's more awareness, at least, of what postpartum depression is. Do you think there's more societal support than there was when the book came out?
Yes, 100%. But I think there's also much more societal support than we think there is even now. Like, I would never have thought of writing this book if I knew it was going to be this book. This is not a book that you go like, oh, I'm going to adapt this into this particular 3-act structure. Like, no, like it's just not. But I was driving down the West Side Highway picking my kids up from school, and I must have been listening to doctor's radio, and this woman called in from the middle of the country somewhere, and she was alone in her house and she was crying and she felt all these feelings and she was too ashamed. And the radio host said, well, why don't you speak to somebody? I couldn't possibly tell my husband. Why don't you tell your mother? I couldn't do. Why don't you go and speak to, your clergy? I could never do that. And she felt that she had nowhere to go. And I was just like, whoa. Wow, I thought everybody was like totally cool with this now. Like I thought that, famous people were talking about it. It's been on the cover of People magazine or whatever, everybody knows about this. Isn't this great? Everything has changed. And then I heard this woman, this must have been like 7 years ago. And I was like, no, I live in a city. So of course I think that, and yes, it might be on the cover of People magazine, which is national, but still we tell ourselves we can't talk about it. So I think there is much more external support and organizations and understanding of depression, and especially now of mental health and the burden that's placed on the mother. I think people really saw that a lot during quarantine. But I think it hasn't translated to the person who's having it, if that makes sense.
Personally, yeah.
I had never taken antidepressant medication, and then I had my son, and I was a nervous wreck. I don't think I slept for like the first 2 weeks. I remember at some point thinking, like, if only I had toothpicks, because if I had toothpicks, I could put them in my eyes to keep them open.
I've been there.
Because I was so petrified if I closed my eyes for even 1 second, something would happen. I can't look away for 1 second because something's going to happen, and I don't want anything to happen to him. And then when he was around 1 or so, I finally went on antidepressant medication. And, you know, all the kind of trope things of like everything did go from black and white to color. Like I could see things, I could feel things. All the things that they tell you about it aren't, you know, that people say that are negative about it aren't true. It's not like taking Xanax or getting drunk or even getting high. It's not something that's going to make you feel other. It's something that somehow makes you feel like yourself. And it's only once you feel like yourself that you realize like how far you've gotten from that person because you're so unwell. When I got pregnant with my daughter, no one really knew if you should stay on antidepressants or if you shouldn't, because would it come through your breast milk? And so I was like, oh, well, forget this. Of course, I'm not going to do this. I mean, I'm somebody who, you know, wouldn't have taken an Advil unless I really, really had to while I was pregnant. I'm not going to take this. But again, I mean, not to keep going back to the same analogy, you would never say that about your asthma medication. You would never say like, I'm going to not use my inhaler for 9 months. But in all fairness, we didn't know what it did. And now there's been enough time to see that it's safe. The fears of these big bad things happening when you're pregnant, if you take an SSRI, have been disproven. So like you can take that safely. That's a change. You could know afterwards to go back on medication. You know, that's a change. You can ask for it. But still, you know, when you see the gynecologist at the 6-week moment, not all gynecologists test you to see what your thyroid number is. And that's also a very important thing. If you're feeling down and low after having birth, you could also just have postpartum thyroiditis. And so like that would be the first thing to get check to make sure that you don't just need more Synthroid. I actually had that. I have both those things. But anyway, they don't all screen. You know, they don't all say, how are you? They might say, how are you feeling? Okay, great. You can go back to exercise. You can go to work. But they don't often stop and say, how are you feeling? And that's not necessarily the doctor's fault. Like it's also the system's fault. People don't have time. Or sometimes the doctors don't know. Sometimes it's older doctors and they haven't caught up with this conversation. Right. And so that's why I really do think, at least for now, it's up to us to go to look at new mothers as older mothers and to say, how are you feeling? And to actually give them some kind of signaling that they could actually tell you how they're feeling. Then even if somebody is telling you they're great, but you have a feeling they're not so great, to check in with them. And I think if we can do that, almost mentor younger mothers, like care about younger mothers, then we'll be able to compensate where there are holes.
We're talking to Amy Koppelman, the author of A Mouthful of Air, and we'll be right back.
All my kids learned to swim when they were little. It was super important to me that they be confident and safe in the water. There was only one problem with that: taking them to swim lessons. I mean, the pools were freezing. There were always cranky adults doing laps right there. And it was definitely not, for any of us, what you would call fun.
Amy, heard. But now there's Goldfish Swim School. Goldfish takes a really thoughtful approach to swim lessons, combining research-based teaching with a warm, kid-friendly environment that actually helps kids thrive in the water.
Every detail at Goldfish is thoughtfully designed to create a golden experience, from shiver-free, warm indoor pools to comfy waiting areas for parents to professionally trained lifeguards on deck.
Goldfish uses an approach called the science of swim play, which combines guided play with proven teaching techniques to help kids learn to swim, build water safety skills, and gain confidence, all at their own pace. Lessons are designed to meet kids exactly where they're at.
If you've been thinking about swim lessons or just wondering where to start, this is a great opportunity. Right now, Goldfish Swim School is offering a waived membership plus your child's first lesson free at participating locations.
Just visit goldfishswimschool.com/free to find a location near you and enroll using promo code FREE.
That's goldfishswimschool.com/free, promo code FREE.
Amy, when I'm having a good hair day, it usually makes my whole day better. And that's why on every day, I'm taking Nutrafol.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, and it's the #1 hair growth supplement brand personally used by dermatologists. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements are peer-reviewed, NSF certified for sport, and clinically tested.
Nutrafol offers multiple formulas for men and women tailored to different life stages and lifestyle factors, so you get support that's actually right for you. Adding Nutrafol to your daily routine is easy. Order online, no prescription needed, with automated deliveries and free shipping to keep you on track.
Let your hair be one less thing to worry about. See visibly thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair in 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you visit Nutrafol.com and enter promo code LAUGHING.
That's Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code LAUGHING. Okay, we're back. We're talking to Amy Koppelman. She's the author of A Mouthful of Air, which is also now a movie written, directed, produced by Amy. Can you tell us a little bit about how moving the book to a movie changed the story?
Yes, when I heard you say written, directed, and produced, I thought, boy, at least all the blame is on me.
Or all the glory, maybe all the glory.
And I was just like, maybe that's a good thing, because I know when my last book came out, I was very disappointed with certain things, the movie on my last book. But when you said it like that just now, I was just like, oh.
That's really happening.
Felt that little surge.
I can't blame anybody else if I'm a rotten tomato. The fact that that's a metric in my mind, talk about feeling ashamed.
Yes.
That actually, by the way, is warranted shame, that I can, actually look at Rotten Tomatoes and go like, oh, I'm so dumb, but I'm so bad at this. So it's very exciting. I honestly can't believe it. The book got rejected. Truly, like, this isn't apocryphal, by basically every agent in New York. It took so long to get the book published. I finally found an agent in San Francisco named Amy Renner. She got it published by an independent press. It came out. It had like 2 printings. And then, that was the life of the book. And then not until I heard that interview that I was telling you about did I think, oh, I should bring this back alive. Like, this still matters. And now seeing that it's going to come out in 800 theaters, that's like 800 communities. That's 800 places where like this story can possibly touch people and help people. Not until just now when you said that did I stopped to think of like, oh, what if people don't like it? I've just, in my mind, have just been like, you are going to be able to get to some of those people that you didn't have the ability to get to the last time around. And I know for me, reading was really so much of a salvation. It was so much how I learned that I wasn't alone, or I wasn't as much of a freak. You read something and the author of the thing you're reading is able to put into words, or, their characters' words, these thoughts and feelings that you might not even have known that you've been feeling. And then you read them and you're just like, yes, that's exactly how I feel. They're able to articulate that so that you have this connection and, somebody, whoever wrote this book, and that person exists and you are not the only person who feels this way. So now I'm thinking, okay, there's 800 theaters where people can see this, and it's so much easier and more fun to go to a movie than to read a book. And so I'm very excited about that. I'm really proud of Amanda's performance. She gives a profoundly beautiful portrayal of, like I keep saying, how scary it is to be a mom. All moms can relate to that. And I'm hoping that it makes the places that aren't cities, or the towns or the communities that don't talk about this, that in some small way we get to some of them, so that, people aren't as scared to go into their church, or people aren't as scared to tell their doctor, because they can say, oh, it's like this movie. Or people who love somebody like this can see this movie and be like, oh, geez. And I tried really hard in the movie to show that her husband, when you love somebody who's depressed, depression has collateral damage, and suicide is the worst thing you could possibly do. But even just the depression alone has collateral damage. Your kids feel it, your husband feels it. And if you're somebody who, like Julie, had tried to kill herself, you've put your spouse, everybody who loves you, in a very difficult situation, because no one wants to be the person that hurts you. They don't want to hurt you. And so somehow it like makes the people who love you almost, impotent to do anything because they don't know what to do. So maybe if they see this movie, they'll at least be able to say to somebody like, look, this is what I'm seeing her doing. She is acting like this person. And I'm really scared. I do not know what I'm supposed to do. And maybe that will help that person be less of a prisoner, because you do become handcuffed when you love somebody who you're worried about.
I do see women, I feel like, talking more about their anxiety and depression. I see those conversations happening. And I do note that when I talk to my mother and people of her generation, that they talk about stuff. And I'm like, that was postpartum depression. Somebody said to me once about being with their little kids, like, I was in a basement apartment and all I saw all day was wet feet. And I just stared at wet feet. And I was like, oh, you were depressed. That was postpartum depression. And I see those conversations happening. But I think this metaphor that you have about using an asthma inhaler is also really interesting for us as observers, that in the same way that you say you wouldn't feel guilty about using an asthma inhaler, similarly, you might see someone struggling with depression and a mom struggling and think, oh, well, that doesn't really involve me. That's not really my problem, or I shouldn't get involved in that. But if you saw that same person struggling to breathe, your instinct would be to run over and figure out how to help. That's an aspect of it, I think, that's really interesting. How can we help people help moms who are struggling with this kind of depression?
What you were saying made me think that also you'd call home and you'd be like, I'm at the park and I left my inhaler and, and your spouse or your partner would have no problem coming to help you. But I think the whole topic of what it is like to become a new father, how isolating that is, how you feel outside the two of them. I mean, there's so many things that make being a father difficult. I do think that that is a topic that nobody talks about because that would make, that's a weak thing. And I think that that's a very big problem, is that we still look at depression. And again, the depressed person does this more than anybody as being weak. It's like weak and strong versus well and unwell. And we have to somehow bridge that. And if you love somebody like this, if you're married to somebody like this, if you think that they are having an asthma attack, take them to get an inhaler. It sounds like such a stupid analogy now that we've brought it even to this length. I'm like, oh my God, am I still using this analogy? But it's a perfect analogy.
We're big fans of analogies because it helps us understand sometimes big, complicated things.
But he's a good husband. I mean, Julie's spouse in the novel, and I'm assuming in the movie too, he's trying really hard. He's doing everything right. I thought it was a really interesting choice, sort of dramatically, that he's not abandoning her. He's really doing his best, but the depression is bigger than both of them. So it becomes more complicated than asthma because it's a lot less clear cut what's going on.
Right. Yeah. So if we kind of could explain to people, this is what's actually going on. Look, until there's a way to quantify what's actually happening, until there's a blood test or a way to measure, you have a hard time breathing, you breathe into that little ball, the doctor can say, oh, you need this, you need one, whatever it is. I think that all of us, including myself, are going to always question, is this a real thing? Because look at those women in Afghanistan. Somehow they don't even have beds. And they were able to get out of bed this morning, which wasn't even a bed, and get to the airport and try to escape. And I, in my house, can't figure out how to get out of my clean sheets to get to the kitchen to make a cup of coffee. What right should I have to be alive? It only reinforces it. So I tried to make Ethan the same as everything else for Julie. I didn't want it to be in reaction to having a husband that wasn't there. I didn't want it to be in reaction to having a husband that was mean to her, cheating on her, an alcoholic, abusive. Even about a month ago, when I started speaking to people on Zoom, and I was getting confused with time because it's been such a long time since I've had a real episode of depression. Even I called my psychiatrist and I made an appointment to see her. And I said, did I have postpartum depression? Did I ever really have depression? Because I feel like when I'm talking to people, I'm lying. Was it that bad? Was it, when you first saw me before I had kids? Because when I had kids, I never had wanted to kill myself, not for a second. But before having kids, and I was in a very dark place. I mean, I know that feeling. And so I was like, I know all those things happen. But even me now, I'm thinking, oh no, it's not real. I'm not real. I'm making this up. And I mean, I've spent my whole adult life talking about this. And finally, maybe what I've been talking about and where we are and how we're thinking about mothers and community are all going to dovetail. And instead of feeling like this huge sense of relief, like maybe you're going to get to a point where you're not like screaming into an abyss, which is what it was like when it started. I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't even exist. I never even had it. And that's like the trick that your mind plays on you. And it's one of the things that people have asked me about with the film is this idea of why would anybody ever feel that they would be at peace if they weren't alive? Why would somebody think that the best thing that they could do for their children, who they love? Like, that's the other thing. I really wanted to show a character, just like taking away those obstacles. I didn't want to show depression as a dark, emo kind of thing. That's never what broke me. What broke me constantly was the beauty of everything, my children, the beauty of the love I had for them, the beauty of like the little yellow flower punching through the snow in the spring, the fact that knowing that everyone you love and you care about, you're going to have to say goodbye to. All of that was just so overwhelming to me, and I couldn't get past it. I know that all happened, and yet part of me, and still I can break from moments from time to time. But it's a confusing thing.
I do think there's that distance between, I was saying on a recent podcast, I was looking at my new niece and I said to my husband, why don't I remember having a baby girl? There's a fog that envelops some of these experiences in our lives that I think it makes some of them kind of hard to access. I have pictures of me holding a 1-year-old girl. I did it, but why don't I have access to that anymore? It's in the fog somewhere.
Yeah. In retrospect, I think I was writing through the fear of what if I hadn't gotten the help that I needed? And when I had gone off the medication to have my daughter, I was basically praying to the bottle of Zoloft. I was like, 42 more days, 39 more days. Oh my God, tomorrow I'm going to be able to take this and I'm going to be able to feel better. I'm going to be able to lift my son up without being where, I wasn't petrified that I was going to drop him, and where I actually had the physical strength to carry him around. And then I gave birth to her and I put her against my chest. And she began breastfeeding, and she was such a good little breastfeeder, and she was so beautiful and small. And I thought, well, I basically lived like this my whole life. Then I had this like respite of, everything being different. And then like, what's 6 more weeks? If I could just breastfeed her for 6 more weeks, I can give her every single thing that she needs to be, healthier. I went home from the hospital. I wasn't lying. Like, nobody would have ever said, are you taking your medication? Because nobody would have thought I wasn't, like, they would have been more scared that I was going to like chug the bottle. It was like a couple days in, and somehow I had this understanding that I was like a train, like about to hit a wall, like at 100 miles an hour, like I was about to crash. I just saw that somehow. And I called my husband at work and I was like, when you get home, I haven't been taking this medicine. Please make sure he goes, well, take it now. And I was like, no, I actually need for you to get home because I need you to check under my tongue and make sure that I really took the medicine, because I really didn't trust myself to take it. So, talking about this, sometimes I just daydream out of it because it must just be more painful, even though it never happened. But,
yeah. Then talking about that connection and those memories. Yeah.
And I was in a coffee shop before COVID and I saw these moms sitting around, these young moms, and they were talking about screen time. I give Bobby 20, whatever their child's name was. And then somehow they were talking about food, what they pack for food. And there was part of me that wanted to go over to them and say, like, guys, don't worry. This is no big deal. If you give your kid a hot dog, they'll be okay with all those nitrates. And then I had this moment of real understanding that, we kind of make these rules of what's being a good mother. A good mother is somebody who's always playing with their child and only lets them be on their screen for 20 minutes. A good mother only feeds organic food. A bad mother wouldn't breastfeed. A good mother's always breastfeed. And we make these rules that we torture ourselves with. But I finally understood that we almost do it because we have to, because the whole idea of being responsible for this life is so vast and so overwhelming that these kind of rules of what's being good and bad and weak and strong, they're like guardrails.
That's right. We need them.
If we did that, then okay, they're safe. But you can't prevent cancer cells from mutating. You can't prevent cars from hitting you when you're on your bike. Like, you actually can't prevent those things. But thinking about that and understanding that is so horrifying that you go like, he can't have a regular Oreo.
Right. I can prevent him from eating a hot dog.
Yeah. You don't think about it consciously that that's what it is, that it's like somehow negotiating with God. Like, you're negotiating with death. Like, if I stand here and don't move, will everything be okay? And you can't as a mother. And I think that if we all let ourselves speak about that in those terms, I've been really anxious lately and on top of my kids. What does that really mean? And then we realize that screen time sometimes is just about screen time, but sometimes it's about just our own anxiety or feeling like we're not doing enough. And if we can start to understand what we're really saying and feeling, what it actually really means, and if we actually listen to our friends and think about what that means for us, everybody in every coffee shop understands to varying degrees these feelings.
The book is heartbreakingly beautiful. I know this movie will be too. And the movie A Mouthful of Air, starring Amanda Seyfried, is out today in 800 theaters, I think you said, Amy. Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Please go see it so they keep it in the theaters. I know I'm always waiting. I'm always like, I'll wait for it to come out on streaming. And I'm like, this isn't going to come out on streaming for like a year or so.
So go see it. Go to the movies.
Go see it. Support women making art. Amy, thanks for talking to us today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.